Just because no one's fighting doesn't mean you're aligned. Fake harmony kills real progress.
Fake harmony can kill real progress.
Today it can be, 20 steps in the wrong direction. Years from now, fix a problem before it becomes a problem is kind of what the mentality is.
And there's a single best practice in my mind. Yeah, it cuts through all of these uncomfortable truths. And it's one word, it's communication. Your family avoids talking about will eventually tear us apart. That succession doesn't fail from lack of planning. It fails from avoiding the plan you already know you need.
You only get one family, but you can always start another business, So it's like, I think just a good thing to keep in mind. Like, keep the cart before the horse on that. Entitlement doesn't make you a leader. You have to earn that. And
welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session.
Welcome back to the Disruptive Successor Show. Today, we're bringing back someone whose story really embodies what it means to carry a family business into the future. Richard Grove is my guest today, and he's the face behind Wall Control, the third generation American-made manufacturer that's become a household name in the world of wall organization. He's helped take a family brand that started as a small tool and die shop in the 1960s and scale it across e-commerce, retail, and even television. And in fact, this has led Richard to start a consultancy serving other small businesses looking to improve their operations, forge strategic partnerships, and a digital presence. For more on how he did that, listen to episode 69 of my Disruptive Successor Show interview with him. Today, Richard and I are diving into something personal and real: the uncomfortable truths that every family business must face to survive and grow. These are from my new ebook, The Family Business Trap: 11 Uncomfortable Truths That Will Save Your Business and Your Relationships. And Richard has lived many of them firsthand. So Richard, welcome back. Great to have you here.
it's great to be here, Jonathan. It's been a while. It's crazy how fast time flies by. But yeah, it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, so it's been 130 episodes, so we can almost gauge how long it's been since we last did it. And so for listeners who didn't catch that episode 69 together, give us a quick version of Wall Control's story and also how you came into the business, because I know you worked for the DoD, right? Department of Defense, as an engineer, and something at some point like a light switch flipped and you said, oh, I could go work for the family business. So to give people a little bit of history of Wall Control and its history.
For sure. Yeah. And I'll try to do it, through the lens of family business, without going too deep in the weeds of what we actually do. But yeah, my granddad started a tool and die shop in the 60s. A very skilled tradesman, and he's 87. He still works 3 days a week. It's still integral to that business. He started doing that. And then my dad, who is his son-in-law, came in when he was 18, when him and my mom were dating, even before they were married. And he started working in tool and die himself. And then in early 2000, my dad and granddad came up with the idea to start this metal pegboard, or not even start a business, but just create a system that they could use in their own tool and die shop, just because everything was either too expensive or not high enough quality. So there was really nothing in that sweet spot of value and strength. And so they created prototypes, created a product, started to put a little structure around a business. They pursued a patent. So checking a bunch of boxes correctly, but just not really marketers themselves. And at this time, I was out of school. I was a mechanical engineer for, like you said, the Department of Defense. And I always had kind of a calling, I guess, to come back and work for the family business. It wasn't we weren't a huge business. So I had a really good job relative to what I was going to be coming back into. So I, was trying to weigh all those pros and cons. And then I saw this, the wall control idea kind of on the shelf and just felt like I could bring value to it. So I came in 2008 and really was focused on tool and die to just help with the engineering side and kind of pay the bills. And then in my spare time, I was working on wall control, and that involved teaching myself SEO, web development, e-commerce, all these different mechanisms to try to generate revenue. So I started doing that, and probably a couple years into it, it was obvious. It quickly became my full-time job, and then started to pick up momentum. Got our own facility, hired a bunch of people, operated a warehouse, that sort of thing. And then just started scaling it. And then in probably the last 5 to 10 years, really 10 years now, time flies, but it is really when it picked up legs and, developed that, best-selling reputation across platforms like Amazon, Home Depot, Lowe's, and our direct consumer arm got really strong. And so it's kind of been, that's kind of been the origin story. And now it's just carrying that into the future. I've been able to hire my brother, my sister, 2 cousins, my mom. She's kind of gone back and forth between businesses. My aunt, she's the CFO at our manufacturing facility. So, very, very involved family, multi-generations. At this point, 3 generations all work. Like I literally saw this morning before the recorded this, I was in my granddad's office with my aunt, my mom, my dad, my brother. And then I saw my cousin over here at Wall Control this morning before I came back. So, back and forth, and I'll go back over to our manufacturing plant when we're done recording here. So we're talking about this before we came on. Uncomfortable truths, that's really what it is. I live it every day. These kind of conversations are conversations that are often not easy to have, but I think important for guys like me and you to have, so people walking their own path know they're not alone, and they have a point of reference to start their own conversations within their own businesses, and just be aware that it's challenging and it's okay to ask for direction. And like we talked about, again, there's no roadmap or manual they give you when you start walking down this path. So, you've done a great job providing this resource for folks, but at the end of the day, it's a path they have to walk themselves and live themselves.
100%. And so I sent you the ebook a couple of weeks ago, I think, and when you read it over the last few weeks, what stood out to you right away as something that you've lived or seen in your family's journey?
Yeah, it's really a great book. One, it's a really fast read. There's no fluff to it. It's really straight, cut straight. I think really what resonates with me the most, the biggest challenge is in our business, and again, everybody's going to be unique, but just that the threat of inertia, kind of how time and, it's like it's your first uncomfortable truth. Just because no one's fighting doesn't mean you're aligned. Fake harmony kills real progress. I think that's a really great way to start it, because that really is the truth. It's like everything can feel fine, but you might be moving in different directions, even mentally or emotionally, and not even know kind of where you're at. So that was, that starting it off with that, I think really is a great jumping off point, and we can kind of dive into that as well. But really just going through all of them, they're all very topical. And I think the other thing to keep in mind as you're reading it is it's like, they're not all, like all 11 aren't happening all at once or to the max degrees. It ebbs and flows. Some of them were very applicable to us years ago, are a little bit less now, and then will actually become more applicable as time goes on, and folks age or want to retire and that sort of thing. So they're good to keep in mind all the time, and it's something I personally will revisit often, and I recommend other people do the same thing.
That's great. I appreciate that. And we're always looking, by the way, shameless plug, for partners who want to co-brand the ebook and send it out to their subscribers, their clients. But so I want to get back to this first truth, right? Which is, it's about clarifying the family's shared vision. Mm-hmm. And the uncomfortable truth was, like you said, just because no one's fighting, it doesn't mean you're aligned. Fake harmony can kill real progress. And some of that, I think I got from Pat Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which I'm sure you've probably read. But was this, like, do you think this was the first thing for you in your business? Or are you saying this is probably the first thing for most businesses, or both?
I think I would say for where we're at and where I'm at, it's probably the first thing for me, because what we have right now, we have 2 unique businesses that are healthy. We have harmony in relationships. There's not infighting. There's not things like that. And that's kind of where that inertia creep begins. Right. And where you kind of, because there's no conflict and there's no like catalyst for change or anything, it can kind of move it can, like, one step in the wrong direction today can be, 20 steps in the wrong direction years from now. And unless something's breaking, you don't really care to address it or fix it, because why do it? Everything's fine. We're making payroll. Everything looks good. There's a little bit of growth in a hard economy. It's like, you just don't get into it. And so I think that one was very, applicable for me now, to just try to, fix a problem before it becomes a problem, is kind of what the mentality is there too. And we've been, you go back 5 years and, that wasn't the biggest problem. The biggest problem was I'll go through and as we kind of walk through them, but the defined roles, and like, we didn't have well-defined roles. There wasn't a lot of communication about who's doing what. And we had a situation where my grandfather had, he was basically out for a couple of weeks due to unforeseen illness. And we were kind of scrambling because, where does this end? Where does that start? And so we were fortunate that it wasn't that, we moved past it and everybody's fine now, but like, that could have been a seriously, potentially fatal blow to the company. If we didn't have the opportunity to still be able to communicate with them and get things on track. And since then, that was kind of our wake up call. And we were able to kind of realign, redefine roles, give access to people who needed it, who didn't realize they needed it until these things happen. And so a lot of times too, I think in business, particularly if you're the leader or the owner, you kind of like, you've got a perspective that other people don't have, and you know how everything works. Well, the people one layer down they don't have that. Like, you take for granted your visibility. And so you need to communicate that to them, because if something were to happen to you, even for a short time, even for a quarter, or even a month, like this happened at year end of whatever year it was. And so like, we're trying to close the books. We're trying to make payroll. We're trying to things you can do in like half an hour might take an entire week for the people underneath you to scramble and figure out. And well, while that's happening, more water's coming in the boat, and you're having to figure, this is, and all of this is outside of the scope of actually even running the business. It's just, or even like being good at running the business or growth or anything like that. It's like survival. And so I think just for people to take a minute and think like, if I was to disappear for a month, how would that impact the people underneath me? And am I taking for granted what I know? How, it could be as simple as just, hey, on Mondays, you need to go check this account, because if this is Bob, this is just an example, but it's like those sort of things need to be communicated as quickly as you realize they could be a problem for the people that you love, who are your family. So.
Yeah. So a lot to unpack there. I think my first thought is, for many years, the coaching that I've been doing has oftentimes fallen into, we need to look at what the roles and responsibilities of each of the people in this company. And maybe we should take a step back and not look at the people's roles and responsibility, but the position or the title's roles and responsibilities. And I mean, this is textbook EOS or business operating system or scaling up methodology textbook, and you see this particularly, it's really particularly noticeable in family businesses, where the family is so tight that there's just this understanding. Well, he's the inside guy, and I'm the I'm the outside guy, and
exactly.
But then that falls into, okay, but what are the systems and processes that you've set up so that if the inside guy were to be gone through whatever reason, death, disability, divorce, a fight,
right,
or just a vacation.
Exactly. Yeah.
How is this stuff getting done? And how do we do it? So, systems and processes following from roles and responsibilities, so critical. And this is the basics of putting a business operating system in place in your company, right?
And you kind of touched on it too. It's like your advantage can be your disadvantage there, because there is that trust, there is that family, and you're able to be nimble and fast because you do have that trust, and you don't have to sit down and go through a performance review with your brother every month. But at that same time, you slowly forget what they're doing, what you're doing, and how to pick up the slack if you need to for someone. So, that I think that's a really important point, is that it's easy in family business to not define those roles. And it's not even because you don't want to have to define a role or make someone a C-suite or something. It's more just literally, how is the job getting done? Who's doing the job? And I promise you, if you have a family business of multiple family members and you haven't asked that question in a while, you will have a hard time answering it. And it doesn't even matter how big you are. When I first started at Wall Control, I was building all the systems we use, all the shipping, all the web platforms, all the EDI, all the API, all that stuff. I was setting all that stuff up.
By the way, it's natural. You're an engineer, so you think in terms of process and system and organization.
Exactly. But then as my brother came on, my sister, and I'm handing these things off, you let a few years go by. I don't know who's managing big accounts, Fortune 100 companies, who's making sure those orders are getting processed. Everything's great. We're shipping on time. Metrics look fantastic. But if there's a problem, I don't know which of two people to ask. That's how
right
foggy it gets over time, and how important it is to just stay on top of it. And you take that to scale, now you've got a real issue, So that's again why I think just revisiting this book, I would say at least bi-quarterly, probably really quarterly is probably what I would recommend doing, because it changes so much, is really important. I mean, another thing, as I was kind of talking through that I think anybody who runs a successful family business over time is going to run into is just where these family members are in their life, what's important to them. Because when I came in, it was all I thought about. All I want to do is grow it. Let's conquer the world kind of mentality. And then we were talking before we came on the air. It's then you start having kids and family, and things start getting pulled a little bit. And who kind of carries that torch? It's not like I'm retiring, but I can take a step back and let my young cousin, who's fresh out of Georgia Tech and excited and smart, let him run with that baton for a little while and take that energy. And that's to say, I would think of myself as I'm the marketing guy. I'm the guy who's going to increase sales, just kind of big picture. But I don't have to be that guy through time. And I can always go back to that if that's what I want to do. So I think having those open conversations, you can kind of get a pulse on where people are. Because the other thing about all of this is it really boils down to communication. And depending on where people are, their receptiveness to having these deep, hard conversations, they might not be where you're at that time. So I would recommend something I did. Anybody who you think you need to have these conversations with, forward this book to them and just be like, hey, I heard this on a podcast, really great book. Nothing we have to think about now, but just kind of good to have in the back of your mind. And that at least gets it on their radar, so that when they have the motivation to talk about it, or they see the pain point, you have this thing to come back to and reference as a kind of a conversation earmark to go speak to. So that's something I've done for myself or within my family.
That's great. Well, we're starting to sound like an infomercial here for the ebook, but
it's not.
I appreciate it. No, I appreciate it. It's all good. Let's get back to this first one, which was to clarify the family's shared vision.
Yeah.
And it sounded like there wasn't ever really fake harmony, where everyone appeared aligned, but wasn't in your family business. But what did you do, and what would you recommend to clients of yours or mine about creating clarity around direction, vision, values, mission, growth priorities, and also, would you do it separately with the did you do it separately for the family and separately for the business? How did you deal with all that?
And it's kind of, and just on a personal note, like I've moved houses and cities since we last spoke. My brother and sister have, there's been a lot of life events that have happened in the family. And so for us, that was a good catalyst to kind of sit down and talk about what we want the future of the business to look like. Just not, what are our goals going to be? Where are we even going to put it? Because we're eventually going to need another warehouse for the wall control side of things. Where do we put that? And that kind of starting there, you start pulling on the string a little bit and you start having those conversations. And I think it sounds super simple, but if everybody just thought about what their vision is for the business in 1 year's, 5 year, 10 year, you think you get some pretty surprising answers. And those are super simple questions that touch on everything. So for example, my dad, the 10-year thing, he does not want to be working. You know what I mean? He doesn't want to be working. Whereas my grandfather at that age, he does want to work. He's 87. He's still working. He has no plans to stop, and it's if you don't start thinking through these things, you start running up against kind of uncomfortable scenarios. For instance, an aging patriarch who's going to outwork or whose son-in-law could retire before him, and it's what dynamic does that play into the family business? And if you don't think about it and talk about it, then the status quo just keeps, marching through time.
Can I pick up on that point there? Because I think this is a source of a lot of tension in families, inside of businesses or outside of businesses. The boomer generation parent of a not millennial, but more like a Gen Z, a younger, and they're looking at them and not understanding where's their motivation in this young person. And I mean, the older generation, they didn't have debt or credit cards. They didn't believe in debt, and they worked really, really hard. And the younger generation, very different. I have a credit card, I'll go buy it, and I don't really have to work that hard, or I'm not interested. So that kind of tension, and then magnify that by putting it into a family business.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had people years back ask me if I would coach their child because they felt that their child was just not ready or able to launch at 26 or 30 and still living at home.
Yeah.
So now magnify that in a company where your 87-year-old grandfather is, he comes in and works hard every day, and his son-in-law, who's much younger, is not
exactly. And it's the crazy thing, and it's the son-in-law is mid to late 60s. That's retirement age too. You know what I mean? It's but
absolutely.
Even still, it's there's still that, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but it's you feel that you still feel like you're that kid who is letting someone down by just doing the thing most people want to do, which is work a little less, spend a little more time with family, travel. It's just they're different people. And the thing that we found is if you talk about it and you don't let it fester, it's not a problem. There's no expectation just because someone likes to work. There's no expectation that the other person, the next generation, shouldn't do what everybody else what normal people want to do, which is spend a little time not in the office, So I think just opening up those lines of communication are important.
And there's a single best practice in my mind that cuts through all of these uncomfortable truths. And it's one word, it's communication.
Exactly.
You said it.
Yes.
If you're having open, honest conversations and having them frequently, and if you've also created a structure and a place, like a structure meaning meetings, family meetings, owner meetings, leaders meetings, managers meetings, you've created a room or a place and a time when you can have these conversations. And if the conversations are getting stuck, then move the meeting location or move the meeting, the environment of where it's happening, or bring in an outside facilitator to facilitate the conversation. I mean, you've got to keep the conversation and dialogue around all these truths in play, not at all times, right?
Exactly. And it's like, the thing I think about is a lot of people, they have these conversations over and over again in their head, and they play them out hypothetic, and it haunts them. And it's so much harder to live like that than just to have the conversation. Because at least in our experience, what you find, and every family's different. We're blessed that our family gets along, but everybody wants what's best for everybody. Everybody wants everybody to be happy at the least, And so like, just start talking about it, and you'll quickly, it'll be more you'll release this tension that you've been carrying around. And even if it went terribly, at least you did that. But what you'll find is probably like, oh, they get your perspective when you share it, and you understand theirs when they share theirs. And then you can find the path forward, because you're not just having hypothetical conversations in your head at 3 a.m. at night when you can't sleep,
So true. So truth number 3, which was establish governance structures. Mm-hmm. And the uncomfortable truth was, without structure, you're running on assumptions. Mm-hmm. And assumptions implode under pressure, which is exactly what you've been saying. So, right, yes. Like, governance isn't sexy, but it's essential. And so I'm wondering, how did Walt Control handle decision-making without letting family dynamics get messy?
Yeah. And the other thing too is like, that topic can feel like, I guess, like, to take a step back, it's like advice I would give maybe to like the patriarch of a company, the first generation or second generation, when you're approached by the next generation about questions about the business or how long they intend to run it, those sort of things. I think there's a tendency for that older generation to take that as like entitlement potentially, or basically what's happening is the second generation is coming to you out of almost a place of fear. They just would like to know what your future looks like in your mind, like whatever it is. They don't, but just to communicate that to them so that they can be a little bit at ease as to like, here's what my plan, and mentally, here's what I mentally think about what I would like to do with the next 10 years. Here's what my vision is for the business. And then you can start the conversation, because what happens a lot of times is I feel like the oldest generation, if they're approached by the next generation and they're like, hey, what are you thinking about retiring? Can I help you with this thing? Like, that can be threatening if you don't want to leave your post. And that isn't where it's coming from. It isn't coming from them wanting to take position or be entitled to their crown or whatever. It's just they're afraid if they don't figure it out, you're going to run into a wall, and you will, So it's like, that would be a little bit of advice I would give there, kind of on the older generation. But yeah. And I think talking about, governance and putting that plan in place, that can sound kind of daunting and intimidating and a little more corporate than what the family business vibe is.
Yes.
And I think just breaking through that and saying, this isn't so we can assign titles. It's just so we can understand everyone else's role. And so we can help each other take this thing to the next generation without losing a step or worse, and that's kind of, we had a situation again where it was like baptism by fire. We had to figure it out. And that's what was our catalyst. But I would definitely highly not recommend that to anyone else. And just like you, like, I consult with businesses every day, and I'll tell them the same things that are hard for me to do, So it's like, this isn't easy stuff, but it's what you need to do to maintain the health of your business and potentially the health of the relationships of the family.
So it sounds like you had some sort of cataclysmic event that you said baptism under fire, but
yes.
do you have leadership meetings, family meetings, and owner meetings? And did they evolve over time?
Yes, we do. And Jonathan, again, the uncomfortable truths, I'm like sweating because it's uncomfortable to talk about, but it's like the way ours have evolved is just more communication, really. And it's as simple as that. We should, and we should, but we don't have like I say this, we have 2 monthly meetings where we will talk about just general direction of the business and things that are going on. And these sort of things will be brought up. But what wasn't happening before is open communication on a daily and weekly basis. Everybody was just kind of working in their own silo and in their own lane. and it was going great. And so there was no reason to change that. And so it's as simple as sometimes a solution is far less complicated than you might think. So like in our case, my grandfather's got a big office there's plenty of empty space in it. So we literally set up other workstations that we deliberately go work in multiple days a week. So it's like all of us together in the same room. Like that alone accomplished a huge amount of communication deficit that we're having. So just by all being in the same room by force has created the communication that we needed to kind of move us to where we're at now. And we didn't have that before. I mean, I'm
how interesting, by the way, because I was going to ask you, where did structure help reduce friction? And, this gets to, and I was thinking structure in terms of, well, we have these meetings on Mondays and Wednesdays and those on Tuesdays, every other, but really you took me back to where it's just like, it's management by walking around. But in this case, just bring everyone in so I can, oversee and overhear what they're working on, what they're doing. Because, by the way, in today's modern business, and I'm talking modern, like since 2001, I was part of a company. I literally sat in a room with like 15 people, and you couldn't hear anything but the clicking of their fingers on the keyboards. And then they were, AOL or ICQ messaging each other, and they were right, 3 seats away. So it's kind of interesting. I like what you did with your grandfather. I think that's great.
Yeah, it's no exaggeration to say, because we have multiple facilities and we're all kind of spread out, and then like just kind of where phase of life is and workload. Some are more remote than others. So there would literally I could go months without interacting with my grandfather and weeks without interacting with my dad, like in any sort of meaningful way. Like maybe I get an email forwarded to me or something, but it's not like communication. It's not talking about where the business is. It's not, looking at the balance sheet and the P&L and that sort of thing. And so just by fixing that like real physical world problem, we resolved a lot of issues and found a lot of solutions to problems that some of them we didn't even know we had. I mean, it's, just the power, I am, it's probably clear by this conversation, I'm no fan of structured meetings. I mean, I think they're important, but it's not like, I'm far more on the side of like, there's death by meeting far more often than there's like progress by meeting. And so we found a way to like marry that, we found a good spot on that spectrum with some pretty simple solutions that are pretty straightforward. And like, if you want to talk more, why don't you be together more? Like, whoa, that's crazy, And so that's kind of where we started and where we're at now.
And was there anything that your family avoided discussing for too long that precipitated that? And that, by the way, relates to the truth number 6 of fostering healthy communication. And that the things that your family avoids talking about will eventually tear your business apart.
We would, I think this is the same for a lot of people. People avoid talking about things that will make the person, if they care about them, that will make the person they're talking to feel threatened in some way. And so those are probably the conversations that were the hardest to get to, the things I want to know that are your job, I don't want to know because I want to do that job. I would just want to know them so I can do my job better, And so I think there's a lot of businesses, family businesses, that kind of are in that same boat. Me wanting to dive deep on the balance sheet of the business, and we have multiple businesses, but me wanting to dive deep on the balance sheet of business A when I'm running business B doesn't mean I think A could be run better. It just means it's going to help me run mine better with that knowledge. And I think making that clear has been very helpful too within our business.
Yeah, I think it's you family members in your business were being introduced over time.
Yeah,
and may still be being introduced.
Yeah,
I don't know. And at what point does financial transparency become like a necessity, or something that's creating conflict or something? I mean, how did you guys deal with that? Or if you can feel comfortable talking about that.
Yeah. And I think we can kind of even pivot. That's a good segue. So we've kind of been talking about the top end of the family structure, patriarch, next generation. And then now we could kind of move to like the entry level, like the new guys coming in. Again, I was saying my cousin, he's fresh out of college, and, we hired him, and, balancing that nepotism, family member versus kind of thing. So the one thing that I think's been helpful for us is pretty much everyone who's come in that's family has been given a project of sorts, and it's kind of been their baby to grow. So wall control would be the example for me. I need to look and see which uncomfortable truth it is, but it's basically that leadership isn't assigned, it's an earned kind of thing. And you probably know which one that is and can read it off better than me, but it's like and that really is true. You can't just assign a leader. The leader has to be respected by the workforce and competent, obviously. So there's all these different elements that go into it. And for us, I think it's been nice because the leadership has developed underneath the project. So like, obviously my granddad started a tool and die shop, his company, he grew it, he's the leader. My dad really helped put together that tool and die shop in, the last 20, 30 years. He hired everybody who's there. He's got the respect of his workforce. He's the clear leader. There's no assignment to it. It's just what it is. And then same thing, wall control. I grew that, from nothing to the brand that it is. I mean, I don't want to, it sounds like I'm bragging, but I'm just saying like, it was me kind of leading the helm there. So there's no question about that within the workforce. It would be different if like there was already this established brand and you just plucked in a nephew and popped them in and said, there you go. I don't see how that would work. If it did, it would probably be dumb luck. And so I think a helpful thing, if you can, as you bring in new family members, give them something they can have ownership of, not in the business sense of ownership necessarily, but just something they can kind of put their stake in and say, I built this. And that goes a long way in establishing that credibility and just the discipline it takes to grow and develop and be responsible for something, to be like the consummate problem solver. And you're the one who has to figure it out if there's an issue. And so to the point of like when do you get visibility of these things? I think for instance, with wall control, if a brand is growing to the point that it's having a financial impact on the manufacturing side of things, that's when you would start to have that conversation. It's out of necessity, but it's also out of like, it's one step before out of necessity. It's out of advantage. So I can grow my side of the business better if I have a better comprehension and understanding of how things are working on the other side of the business. And so that's, I think, when you would probably introduce that visibility at whatever it is you're considering in your own business. It's not like a need to know basis, but it's one step before that. It's like, if me and this other person in the family can optimize this, we can take this further than if I'm siloing the information and just spitting off what I think I want them to know about it.
Yep. So yeah, these related to a couple of the truths. One was the truth number 11, executing a generational succession plan. And, that succession doesn't fail from lack of planning. It fails from avoiding the plan you already know you need. And then also having a family employment policy around, because nepotism becomes a real problem. If you don't have standards, it breeds resentment, not loyalty. So those were a couple of the truths you touched upon. And it reminds me of, your story is very much the story of in my family's business, where my father, Walter, and my uncle, Jerry, joined a men's clothing business. They were manufacturing clothing, right? And what I learned from my uncle's cousin who ran the manufacturing plant was that they didn't really know where to put Walter and Jerry. My dad came with a degree from Yale Law School and practiced law for a year and hated it. I don't know what my uncle did. So they said, well, we don't really have a place for you. So, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create our own branded line of clothing because we do everything basically for other brands that we're manufacturing for them, private label. Well, we're going to create our own brand. We'll call it Waljair,
Yeah.
after the two boys' names. And, we're going to help you out. There's going to be no cost of goods associated. You just got to go out and sell these men's suits. It'll be a knockoff of some of the other stuff we're doing and see what you can do. So that was creative, I thought.
And I think you really have to do something like that unless you're very clear that you're hiring particularly family for a role and they're happy with that too. And we have some of that in our family too. Like it's just the skill set matches a role and that's very well defined versus just kind of coming in, not knowing what they're going to do and trying to find a place. So I think you either have to hire them for a role or they have to come in with their own project, for lack of a better word, that they're responsible for and that they grow. And then you can watch it and over time you can, see how that goes, what their leadership looks like, kind of problem solving skills, that sort of thing. And it can morph into something else. But I think that gives it a good starting point, and it allows them to make a name for themselves without walking in looking like they just have a name on the back of their jersey and they get to play quarterback because of that. So that's kind of that's what it seems like. And again, everybody's business is different. It's like a medical practice. It's like the practice of business. We're practicing, it could be done better. Yes. Are we doing it the way we're doing it, for reasons that we think that make sense? Of course. And so, you have to just kind of take it all with a grain of salt and understand. I think also being able to be honest with your family and course correct if you have to, if things aren't going in a good direction and you've made a wrong assumption or, any things along those lines, you can't just stick to whatever, role or structure that you have assigned to it and force it to work. You have to be flexible in that regard as well.
I have to underscore what you said about each business is different. Like, even though I put together this 11 truths that are somewhat prescriptive that you could follow and start to deploy, where you start and where you end are going to be very, very different. And each situation, each business is really just so different. And some of that, by the way, is just dictated by what's going on outside of the business, right?
Sure.
Market forces, economic forces. Right. My family's business, some people said, why did it close down after 80 years? And I was like, well, one, there was no one to carry the torch into the next generation. Two, the manufacturing was all leaving the Northeast United States and the middle of the country, and it was going over to Asia. And so who was going to lead that of let's go and set up sourcing, manufacturing, and three, they were mostly in men's suits. Not a lot of men wear suits to work anymore, but that's
true.
So there's a lot of outside forces. Each business is different. Each family is different.
And even like, just because, it got folded up and sold or whatever, that is a good outcome too. It might just be, we don't want to do this anymore like we're doing it. And there's nothing wrong with that either, so, don't try to force that. If the consensus is, we've had a good run, let's find a way to like unwind it and, stay family. And it's like, I think we've talked about this before, and I might butcher the quote, but it's like, don't ruin your family for your business. You only get one family, but you can always start another business, so it's like, that's I think just a good thing to keep in mind, like keep the cart before the horse on that. So, and one other thing I'll throw in there too, like going back to the 11th uncomfortable truth, succession planning, things like that. Don't be afraid to say to everybody, we need a intermediary third party professional to like help us with this. Because most businesses are only going to do succession planning, once a generation. Whereas these people who do this professionally see it every day. So like, how are you expected to do the best job you can with your own business when you're only ever going to probably do it once or maybe twice if you're fortunate enough to hand it off to the next generation? So anytime you run across something, and I would call those like one-off experiences, anytime you're going to go through such a massively impactful one-off experience, don't assume you and your family can figure it out to the optimal amount by yourself. Like, bring in people and get valuable insights from, guys like you who've seen this kind of thing too. Like, reach out to your network, and, even if everybody brought their own third-party person at that first conversation, so nobody felt like they were being steamrolled by somebody else, like, that's okay too. But just don't let something so impactful be left to how good you think you can do it the first time you've ever tried,
Good. Okay. So are you ready for, as we wrap up, a little rapid fire round? This is supposed to be fun.
Yes, let's do it. Let's have some fun. Yeah, but, no. I think you're sending up that heat down in the islands there. So
yeah, I'm down in the islands and I'm sending some heat your way. So quick answers. First thing that comes to mind. So which uncomfortable truth did your family struggle with the most?
I would say definitely kind of how we kicked it off. That number one, the momentum of inertia, and just trying to break out of, you're literally taking like a comfortable situation and making it uncomfortable for, quote, no reason, but it's so you can make sure you're moving in the right direction. And that also kind of goes with the third uncomfortable truth, just around defining structure and having conversation about that. So that would definitely be kind of the one and two, which is 1 and 3 for us.
Okay. And are those the truths that made the biggest positive difference in your business?
Yeah, because I would say if you can get that right, because it's like we've been talking about, that requires communication. Once you're able to do that, now you can tackle the other stuff. It's like you've fundamentally put yourself on a foundation where you can address these other things. Like, you can't talk about firm succession planning if you are afraid to have a conversation about direction of the business. So it's like, I think some of these you'll naturally just cover before you get to the other ones, again, unless there's some tragic or otherwise life event that forces it.
All right. And last 2 questions is one piece of advice for the next generation and one piece for the parent generation.
Yeah, for the next generation. And we kind of touched on this before, but entitlement doesn't make you a leader. You have to earn that. And, and I'll just say this, frankly, I've seen this before in other businesses and just in different ways within our own. You don't want that. You don't want to just be stuck in a role, because you won't have the respect of your workforce. And it's going to be, everybody has imposter syndrome of some sort if you achieve any sort of success, but you will literally feel like that's you, so you don't want to feel like an imposter. You want to know what you're doing. You want to have the respect of the people you work for, and you're not going to, it's not to say you need to be a people pleaser. That's definitely not the point, because you can't be that either. But you need to feel like you're firmly where you should be. And I think the best way to do that is to kind of earn that spot.
Richard, this is fantastic. Your experience, your knowledge, your passion, it just validates so many of the truths that families struggle to talk about and work through. And so I appreciate you sharing your time that you're working through it. And where can listeners follow you? Where can they actually get a great pegboard for your garage? And, and where can they contact you about your consultancy, the small business consultant?
Yeah. So I would say the best thing, so for wall control, just go to wallcontrol.com. That will get you in the right place. Happy to help anybody directly if they need that help as well. And so the easiest way to reach me is either on Instagram or on X, formerly Twitter. And my handle is Mr. Wall Storage, MR Wall Storage, on each of those. So feel free to follow, reach out, send me a DM. Happy to help however I can.
Guys, if you have a home garage that needs organizing, or a workshop or a tool shed, and you want organization, I think Wall Control is a must-have. I would love to have that in my garage.
I got you, Jonathan. I need to, when you get back up here, let me know.
All right. And folks, for those who want to download the Family Business Trap, 11 Uncomfortable Truths ebook. You can get it at thegoldhillgroup.com under ebook in the free resources section of my website. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show, and stay tuned for future episodes.
This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.